Today is no ordinary rugby man. He's a former Ireland captain, an Ulster icon, and the man who once led his team straight into the Haka, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, refusing to step back. But Willie Anderson's story runs deeper than folklore. He grew up in 6 Mile Cross, County Tyrone, during one of the most divided times in Irish history. In a place where identity could split communities, rugby gave him something else, a place to lead, to unify, to defy. He played for and captained Ireland, but his greatest mark may have come as a coach. Moo and I both had the privilege of playing under Willie at London Irish, and I was also lucky enough to play for him at Dungannon. What we saw firsthand was a leader who pushed hard, demanded honesty, and led with heart, often crossing the line to make a point or to draw one. Willie's life has spanned triumph and trauma. In 1980, a prank on tour spiraled into a harrowing ordeal. Detained by Argentina's military junta, facing consequences few could imagine. Later, personal tragedy and addiction tested him in ways that no match could ever could. But through it all, he reinvented himself as a coach, as a father, as a mentor. And now as co-author of Crossing the Line, he's telling the whole truth. This isn't just a story about rugby, it's about leadership under fire, identity in transition, and the courage to face the mirror long after the final whistle. Willie Anderson, welcome to the business end.
Thanks very much, guys. Great talking to you again and great seeing you both again.
Yeah, great seeing you, Willie. Great to have you on the show, and we're looking forward to speaking to you today.
Thank you very much indeed. I really am looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. So you grew up. We always ask this from people like yourself about what's in your DNA to make you an elite player and an elite leader. You grew up in a small farming village in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, 6 Mile Cross. What do you think was in your DNA that you think shaped you as a leader, shaped your edge, and your identity, both as a person and as a player?
I think growing up on a farm is a fairly isolated sort of thing. The great thing about it was that, well, I enjoyed working hard. I enjoyed the work ethic of a farm. I probably should have been a farmer, but because I wasn't that bright, in terms. But I think the thing that you've got values on a farm. You do a day's work and you get paid for a day's work. You had to be honest. You had to be always truthful. But the values my father would have laid down would have been, you did the job. You didn't do half a job. You did the job to the full. And I suppose as well, in ways I enjoyed that sort of tough, hard work. And I always sort of had the view, because I didn't even know what rugby was until I left primary school. And then when I left primary school, actually I didn't pass 11 plus, which was another driving force, maybe to show people that, that I could do it, I could make it somewhere along the line. And then I fell in love with the game of rugby, when I was 11, 12, and I'd be out practicing kicking, like even a squeezy bottle, I didn't even have a rugby ball, a squeezy bottle over the barn roof. So and those things stuck, with me. Hard work, honesty, and then I got away to college, So I eventually, I didn't even pass me O levels, so I had to repeat them. So it was always a kind of step back, and I realized not so long ago that I suffered from dyslexia, like my son and daughter actually both did. So I didn't know, and that was probably my holdback. But Anyway, look, those are the kind of things that your setbacks actually make you a stronger person, and then eventually I got to college, did 3 years there, nearly flunked it, but I just about crawled over the line and became a teacher and a coach. So, and I was still playing rugby at that time. So,
I mean, from our time working and knowing you over these years, I mean, your honesty and hard work came through in spades. You know that amongst many other traits, but those were obvious, very much so. You've worked with some great players over the years. Was there any common denominator in that made them different in your mind? Were there similar traits?
I think that I it's funny actually. The biggest thing that you have when you have a player is that you can trust and respect them, and that works both ways. Um, I think respect his ability. He has to have a degree of ability, a massive amount of competence in what he does, and that is vitally important. But also, you have to be able to trust a player that he's going to stick to it, that he's going to stick to what his personality is, that he's going to stick to the game plan, he's going to stick to the end of the game, and 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 those players, there you might think that they're plenty of, but for a player not to lose it 5 minutes to go, or lose it when the chips are down, or throw that bad pass, or not make the right decision, that is immense. That is, and I cannot I kind of have a wee pyramid of W's, um, and uh, they're sort of like very, it's kind of a funny one, like they're like you've got the sort of absolute extreme guys at the very top who are the winners, all right, and even top of that, and then you've got the guys who are the waverers, and then you've got the wankers. So, and even above that, you'll have the guys who are absolutely immense. Um, People like Mark McCall, people like Jeremy, um, people like Brian O'Driscoll. There, there's something that that you can depend on that person. Um, um, that they will not let you down when the decision is to be made. They will not give up. They will always keep going. Um, the likes Kieran Dawson as well. There's is infinitely a number of guys, but you need to have 5 or 6 of those guys on your team to make it a quality team. And even if you apply that to business, the guys you can trust and respect in your business, and I've talked to my sons about this, is vitally important as well, because in business you have to have the people that you work with, they're on your shoulder. They're not 15 or 20 yards behind you. They're on your shoulder and they're working for you. And that's the same on any side. And if you've got if you've got if you've got 5 or 6 of those guys on your team, then you're flying. I mean, that's a lot, because I'm looking at teams around. I'm saying, can I trust that guy to really stick to the game, the game plan for that match, or the match plan? Can I stick to it? Can I trust that guy to ensure that he's not going to give away a yellow card, or not keep going, or not keep encouraging, or whatever? And those are the kind of things that I would look for in players.
Do you
And,
think?
and
Sorry, Moo. Do you think those characteristics are intrinsic to the individual, or do you think they're developed with in the environment through coaching?
I think it's both. I think there's quite a lot to do with the personality, and I would have probably ensured that I would have, with any team, tried to in the latter days, when I sort of reinvented myself, because I had to change, I had to learn about myself, about what my personality was, what was important to me, what and what how I progressed, not went backwards. I had to how what's best for me to go forwards, and then looking at players' personality types and analysing them, and that is part of it. What their personality is, and also the environment where they came from, their ethics or values from where they came from, and then the coaching. The coaching, the coach environment, because it's I've seen so many players who have been on the scale upwards. Like, for example, like in where I come from, like, they play for Ulster schools for maybe a couple of years, then they play for Irish schools, then they get out and then they play for the under-19s, and then they play for the under-20s, and then they get into the academy, and they're not picked. They don't get on the team, and they stop. They give up because they have never had failure. They've never had an environment when they are allowed to fail, or they never had defeat. How do and that's vitally important from where they come from. Is the drive and determination still there? Because I suppose, whenever I even got my cap at 29, it wasn't a question of getting a cap. And like you say, Fitzy, whenever you get a cap, you say, cheapers, I want to get another 10, 15, 20 caps. I'm in stopping here. So if you've got that drive, and a lot of guys get their cap and stop, and there's not that same drive and determination. So, yeah, I think it's a part of the person himself and the environment that they're in, the coaching and are in, and you want guys probably to listen. you it's okay. Somebody saying, yeah, I know, and then you look at him and you say he's not doing what you just when you ask him to do, or what we agreed on, or what we stuck, what a plan is, or his individual that he needs to go away and work on. So it's vitally important that person understands that they're not the final sort of item, that they are still growing. The journey is still there, and if you want to go forward, you have to keep wanting to learn to go forward. It's not over. Just
Yeah.
with it.
I mean, there's two like really important aspects. I mean, me and Fitzy were talking about this last night, really, about if you're looking at business, everyone talks about training leaders and leaders to be better, but you need to have individuals within the team that are coachable. And if they're
Yeah.
not coachable, you're going to fail. And therefore, it's also, I mean, I also talk about this a lot in terms of like companies, and your sons will be like this as well. When they're hiring, sometimes they're looking at skill sets rather than qualities. And I think sports teams, businesses overlook those 2 points. You need to find people that are, one, coachable, and number two, they've got the right drive, right background that fits
Yeah,
what you're trying to
this
achieve.
and they have to have the right character and competence, and
Yeah,
this is where I think unfortunately, a lot of companies, and even if you take like Ulster or Munster or Leinster or Saracens as a company, if you look at companies, how many of them do not do their due diligence in picking the right coach? Like, to pick a director of rugby is different for picking a head coach is different from picking an assistant coach, is different from picking a skills coach. And how many people get that wrong? They don't do the due diligence. They don't, get into the depths of the character, of the personality of the coach. Will he be able to take the pressure? Will he be able to? Has he got the knowledge and the competence to be able to, lead the thing? Does he crack under pressure? But a name might come up. Oh, he's got a name. He's played for X, Y, and Z. He must be good. Or he hasn't got through the correct, the correct coaching levels and been mentored. Is he still learning? Does he need to learn? And that's what happens with CEOs as well. He must be good because he come from this place. But how does he interact with people? How does he lead? Does he lead by good examples, or it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of, I suppose you really answered the next question, is when you're instructed or you're looking at taking charge of a new team, what do you evaluate before saying yes, and what are the early signals that tell you that a team's worth investing in as a leader, a CEO, or a head coach?
Yeah, I think that you have to look at your team. I've had the downside of going into a club side, and like it's like a local sort of senior club side, and I suppose I was in a rebound situation. I wasn't in a job, and I thought, right, I'll coach it. But in retrospect, when I looked in, and when I found the problem is that if you've got an older team, if you've got a team that's 28, 29, 30, going on a bit, and there's not many young guys in it, you're nearly dead in the water because you ain't going to change those guys. So that you want a group, you want a company, or you want that can take change, because change is chaos, but chaos is important to actually make change. You
Yeah,
have to have a shake,
yeah,
and some people need to be moved out, moved on, or moved up. And it's the same in rugby. I've seen it so many times in rugby as well. If you have a young, enthusiastic group of guys who want to play for each other, want to work as a team, want to learn, want to progress and be better, then you're flying. And then if you instill in them that trust and respect for each other and for what we're doing and where we're going, and they can do that with you, then you're 3/4 the way there, if not full the way there.
yeah, absolutely.
And I want to pick
But
up on one point you were talking there when in terms of hiring different coaches, difference between skills coaches and assistant coaches, etc., etc. And I think I'd love to get your take on this, but also when you're looking at hiring those individuals, how do they fit into the greater puzzle? How are they going to interact with the head coach, the director of rugby, the CEO, the back office? Because you can have a great fit in one club, but be a totally bad fit for another because they just don't mesh. There's no chemistry between them.
well, this actually, I've seen this actually happen, and I've seen it happen, very sadly. If, for example, I was asked, to go in hypothetically into Ulster tomorrow as a head coach, as a director of rugby, a head coach, say, the first thing I would say is, these are the people that I want on my side. These are the people I want to bring in. And if you don't allow me to bring these people in, find another coach.
Yeah.
Because if you go into a situation, which I've seen with good friends of mine, going into a situation because they felt I can do this on my own,
Yeah.
or I can persuade the people who are in there to follow me, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the people who are in there have been overlooked because they didn't get the job, and you're coming in to a job that they might have wanted. So immediately, and it's happened in Ulster. It has happened in Ulster on about 3 occasions that I remember. I'm not going to mention names, and I've said that's not going to work.
Yeah.
He's going to last a year, and invariably it has lasted a year because the people in the job stopped him, and he was gone.
Yeah.
And if you are a CEO going into the business, you need to bring in your CFO or your CCO. You need to bring in the people that you know you can trust and you respect, who are very happy in the roles that you're going to give them or that they have been with you, and they will take you forward. Now, obviously, that maybe doesn't happen maybe all the time because there's CEOs and all going into business and then they have to come in their own. But, Jeepers, I wouldn't get into a job unless I was bringing in my own team.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. And you've got to be aligned, from top through to bottom. And if you're not, then you're setting yourself up for failure and heartache.
Yeah, and all of those things, I suppose in ways, and you were part of the process, Fitzy. You were part of the whole situation. Whenever I sort of had that group of players, your group of players, the first thing we did was we sat down and we went through like a process, a business situation whereby we planned. The first thing was planning, and it wasn't just the planning on the pitch. That was part of it. It was a planning of how the club was going to finance it. So there was a planning of the clubhouse. There's a planning of sponsorship. There's a planning of the personnel. Where it was the groundsman. Every single person. Where was the woman making the tea, the dinners afterwards. Everybody was part of that planning. Everybody, from the top to the bottom, and everybody felt part of it. And they threw their issues in, and then you went through all those issues, and then you got, you put them into categories, and then you aligned them to the people who were there. And then the people who were there, whether the physios or whether it was the doctor or whether it was the staff who were making the teas, or it was the bar staff or the groundsman or whatever, they all had a role, and you empowered those people. And whether it was the captain or the vice captain or the fitness guy, they all had a role, and you empowered them. And some people started the planning. They do all the plans, and they can't let go. They can't let go of the plans. They don't want to align people to it, and they certainly don't want to empower people to it, because they want to put out the post, drive the bus, pump the balls up, do the physio and coach the side, and it doesn't work. You have to be able to ensure that the people that you empower, that you can say, where you go, that's your job, you can report to me, but I know that you're quality and you're competent enough to be able to do that, because that's rusty. And that's vitally important. And we did that, and it was a 3-year program, and in the 3rd year we won the All Ireland.
Indeed, we did.
And that was, and you were, and even though you mightn't have thought it, you were part of that whole process from the very beginning, where you sat down in the clubhouse. I still remember it, and going through every issue that we had to have.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting looking back on then. I was, early 20s at that point, and you don't know what you don't know. As over the next decade plus of being in various environments, when it's right, and you equally know when it's not right. When that level of detail hasn't been put into it, or you've got misaligned camps within a program, and that's something that I've seen as an athlete, as a coach, as as a businessman, it's if you don't get that alignment and that level of detail, you're as I said earlier, you're setting yourself up for failure, you're setting yourself up for heartache.
Yeah, and as I say, and then the final push is vitally important is that you empower those people in the roles that you've aligned them to take charge of that particular area. And that's in business. I mean, it's a business model. It's a business model that I was helped to use, and then use it, and then you have to ensure that by doing that you ensure that the personalities that you empower to do those jobs, that they're competent, that you trust and respect them to do it, and that again comes back to their personality. You don't want somebody who's not capable of being able to lead something because his personality isn't set for that. He might be a follower. He's not a leader. So that is why it's the whole sort of. I know it's big in America. And, the personality profiling is
Mm-hmm.
essential. Now, you can have as I, as I always say, you can have the nice, flurry, fancy, nice, personality profiling, and everybody's, happy, clappy. Or you can have somebody really getting in and saying, if you don't change, pal, you ain't going forward. And these are the things that are important for you. And that's just something I had to go through myself. I had to go through certainly a sea change in terms of looking at myself and being pushed to look at myself through the Enneagram, because I was the problem. The players weren't the problem. The system wasn't the problem. I was the problem. And I was putting the fear of Jesus into people rather than actually trying to help them change. And I had to change myself to be able to do that. And that was the biggest transformation of my life.
Yeah.
And I had to learn by mistakes now, and ensure that I didn't revert backwards, because you're asking, one of the things I was saying that you wanted to ask was about what did you learn when you're going to take a group of players? Well, to be positive, to don't be shouting at guys, to stay, completely in control. And on some occasions that's fairly difficult for me, but to stay in control, be positive, keep being positive to the players on the pitch, even though it may be mistakes. Look, keep going and keep affirming what you need to affirm to them, and help them change, or help them see what they need to do or learn. So that was the biggest transformation on my part to become a more successful coach. But it wasn't a fluffy thing. I can tell you, a smack in the face personality profiling.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's different. It's like you've got the.
Well, I think like when they do psychometric testing, I'm in my business. I'm not really. I always think like your truth sessions, Willie, would be a great test of a personality rather than doing a psychometric report. I think
Yeah,
pushing
yeah,
people
and,
out of
and
comfort zone.
360, and I've done that with a few, right few sides. All the sides that I would have worked with were fantastic. And it's funny actually. I remember, like, and as it's in the book, I remember the one with Leinster, and like Keith Gleason, who was absolutely straight honest guy. He was tough guy, really, from Australia. Didn't pull any punches. And when O'Driscoll got up and said what he said, well, if you cupped yourself on and you didn't, fuck around so much, you would be like a world class player. And he had to take that on the chin, and that and that's just fact.
Yeah,
Sorry for my language there, but I mean that's and that has happened. I remember doing an Armagh Gaelic team, and like the coaches were nearly, the couple of assistant coaches were nearly crying before they started the thing. I says, like, this is not going to be that bad, guys. Don't get yourself upset, but you're going to hear the truth. And and Kildare as well, and I remember, taking them, and it was fantastic. But it as somebody always said to me, it's like, dino rod. You were getting the poo out of the system. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? And
yeah,
you have to, because you have to be able to trust the guy. And if
yeah,
you get that, and in business, like, the first guy up there should be CEO. What do you think, folks?
mm,
What do you think of me? Tell me, I need to know, because if you can tell me what I need to change, I'll change if I can,
mm.
because I'm going to be asking you to change. So, you know, it's it's
Absolutely. Yeah,
and a lot of people are scared to do it because they think it's going to be, a death knell, but it's not. It's actually one of the most um, powerful weapons that any leader can do,
yeah,
particularly if he puts himself up first.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely agree with that.
100%. I mean, you've touched upon, and in our conversations, Moo and I, with other guests, and between ourselves, I mean, you've touched upon a really important point, and it goes back to something we talked about before we went live about what sticks in my mind. The picture you had on your wall of your office: life is a journey, not a destination. And when I first saw that, I struggled with what that really meant. But you have to have that growth mindset, because you go through different seasons, and you've just mentioned one, and you've had a lot of success over your coaching career. But at that juncture, you were reflective upon yourself and wanted to grow and keep on growing. So you had to have some hard conversations with yourself and others with you, and that's change is difficult. But if we want to continue to be successful, if we want to continue to grow, it's those kind of conversations, it's that kind of honesty, it's that kind of self-reflection that is critical, to continuing on that journey of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can bring it back again to rugby, which, where we sort of got to know each other, first of all, through the game of rugby football, which is so it's so paramount in ways. And if I can bring it back to that again, to myself, I'm still learning, and even though I have stopped coaching, I'm still trying to even mentor a few guys to change the way they're thinking in terms of the game. At the moment, the game is awful. I mean, it is. I mean, if I heard the word pattern or shape throughout the Lions series once, I must have heard it 1,000 times. They didn't get into their shape quick enough. They didn't get into their pattern quick enough. And I'm saying, what is the game come to? It's about people organizing rather than coaching. Where where is the coaching of cheapers, the game management, the where the space is, the speed of the ball, you know, where the big fellas are. It is all about running away from the ball to get into a pattern, and that's all they do now. It's just about organisation, and I'm saying the game of rugby, is it on from your 22? Oh no, we have to do an exit strategy. The exit strategy is fantastic. And I'm saying, but there's one player out there, you could have actually gone. Did you not look up and see what space is? And the ability of being allowed to players, and the teams that just do it, the teams for me that do it as Toulouse, and they're one of the best sides in the world. France do one of the best sides in the world. Italy to a point, and Argentina. But the rest of them are so patterned. Like even the All Blacks are still patterned. They've tremendous skill and they're fantastic. The Lions, unbelievably patterned. Australia, totally patterned. And I'm saying, where's the creativity? where's the the joy of making a decision because you see there's a fat boy in the middle of the park, or there's a gap there and there's space. Let's go for it. And I'm still trying to learn that, that general movement. And I'm saying, jeepers, guys, there's another way. You don't want to be, robots. There was a guy told me a very, very one of the top class schools in Leinster, in Dublin. And this kid, he went to school there, and I said, well, how did he get on with his coach? Well, he said, look, he was a right big boy. He was probably going to be in the second row or the back row, normally the back row, he said. And on his under 13, he got a video. He got a text or a video saying, you will be getting the ball in the second ruck. Now, that'll be what you'll be doing for the rest of your time in this school. And I'm saying, oh my word. If that is the way we are coaching our kids, sidestep, is there any sidestepping? Is there a decision to make? No. So again, it's about, when I'm talking to a coach, I like them to take a chance because to actually change what you're doing is going to actually not have the benefits of what you were doing until you get it right. And a lot of people can't afford to lose. But a lot of times you have to lose to go forward. And you have to learn by your mistakes. The players have to learn by their mistakes to go forward. Whenever I started off loading with players, the first match you might have overturned, dropped maybe 20 passes. The next time 15. The next time 10. The next time 8. The next time 4. The next time none. But you had to go through that tough process. And that takes a year for that whole process to happen. But nowadays, it's obviously their jobs on the line, their winnings are very, very important. It is all measured. And it's a bit sad. Even at schoolboy level, it's a bit sad.
Absolutely.
But, I'm very upbeat about, when you see the game played with the speed of the ball, where the space is, it's fantastic. It's just a different breath of fresh air.
It's a beautiful game.
Instead of people running away from the ball, they're running, into shape. You're running towards the ball and finding the space. And it doesn't matter who you are on the pitch. You should be able to move that ball or get that ball into the space that's been created. Sorry, that's just me.
No, not at all. And it's exactly, we want this to be conversational, and you raised some very important points, and it's difficult. There's a lot of pressure on coaches. They want to lose a couple of games.
I believe that very much so. And again, I'm only probably saying it in terms of, even though at my age, I still want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to learn. Even if I got an opportunity tomorrow to be a better coach, to ensure that the kids that are playing the game are going to play it because they love it, and that's the way they want to play the game.
For sure.
Anyway.
Let's go back to 1980. What started as a prank on tour with the flag became a geopolitical crisis. Can you take us back to that moment, and when did you realise it wasn't a joke anymore?
Well, it was me and another fellow were walking down walking home, and then at that stage, I think if I give a bit of a reflective background, we actually did no analysis of Argentina before we went. We went with the sort of rugby head on, Hugo Poda head on, steak, rugby, blah 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 in Argentina. And like fantastic people, the Argentinians. What we didn't realize that from 1978 to 1982, which spanned the time that I was there, about 8,000 people went into the Atlantic each year. So whenever when I had a British passport, I have an Irish passport now and a British passport, I have both. But whenever I was away, and then I, I saw this flag. The flag was up during the night. It shouldn't have been up during the night. But anyway, we took the flag. I'll say we took the flag. I took the flag. I got the flag eventually, but it wasn't just myself. And when the 6 guys come through the room, into the room with machine guns, I knew this 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 wasn't just, you know, another sort of Saturday night prank.
That's one way of putting it.
And then, you know, with Ken Boy and the boys, this was certainly, you know, a little bit more serious. And then when I sat on a chair for about 12 to 15 hours, strip searched, and when the consulate came in to see me the next day, the secretary of the consulate says, there's some of the generals want you executed. I definitely
Wow.
I definitely wasn't in a good spot. I says, some of
Funny
them might
that.
want you 10 years. I wrote letters then that I didn't particularly want to write, but again, I you know, I was put in jail with 2 other guys who had absolutely nothing to do. David Irwin, Frank Wilson, they had nothing whatsoever. They weren't even there with me. They were like, they just went down to down to the police station with me, and they just got handcuffed and hauled in. And eventually they got away, and I had to stay on until my trial time. And I got 2 years suspended sentence, and if it had been 2 years and a day, I'd have been doing 10 years hard labour. And it cost, you know, my folks and, you know, a lot of money, just massive amount of money in those times. 10,000, 12,000 pounds. In those days, that's about 100,000 at the moment. But anyway, but I learned about the country, and you know, I'd love to go back again at some stage. You know, I wasn't deported. I wasn't able to go back because, you know, the a tremendously proud nation. However, at that particular time, and it was just brutal. It was a brutal fascist country, and you know, and probably from it and from going to Romania a year after, where it was a completely leftist communist country, there actually wasn't a lot of difference in terms of how people were treated, you know, in terms of left and right and ultra. But which then made me very aware of where I came from, you know, where I am growing up on. You know, when you see women walking up and down fields hoeing 50-acre field, and they look like they're 90, you know, and then kids living and families living in shanty towns and outside of Buenos Aires, you say, jeepers, we're fighting against each other here in this country, and we still have houses, and we still have work, and we still, you know, should be getting on, and we can get on. Sometimes when you go out of the environment you're in and see really what devastation is and oppression and people not getting on, you know, it makes you really think very hard about where you come from and what's out in the world. And I suppose in ways I have to thank rugby for giving me the passport to see the world. I hadn't got 2 pennies to rub together, but I had the luxury of rugby being able to show me not just a fantastic game that's in the world and the people who play it, but just being able to, you know, encounter and learn from what you learn from going to different countries.
For sure.
And
So I
that,
was lucky
sorry,
to get
Willie.
lucky to get out of Argentina, and I thank the people who helped me do so. It was just fantastic. But it was a lesson, when in Rome, do what the Romans do.
Yeah. Was that on the Barbarians tour? Was that an Ireland tour you're
It
on?
was a Penguins tour. It was actually like a
Penguins.
Penguins. Yeah, I was
Yeah, it
nearly
must.
with the Penguins at one stage.
Yeah, yeah. It must be one of the biggest, like, have a few beers and a few japes, and then all of a sudden you're in like banged up with machine guns. It's
Yeah,
just
like it was the
unbelievable.
safest city in the world because nobody stepped off the footpaths there because if you did, you were in jail. And like, the people I met in jail and that stole the car and they were given the waterboard treatment and the
Yeah.
electrodes treatment and
Wow.
shavers.
Did anyone try and stop you taking the flag down? Any of the teammates say, what are you
No, no, no.
doing?
The guy that was with me was actually helping me to do to take it down. And then we realized the flag should have been down at 6 o'clock or when the sun went down because it's
Yeah,
supposed to be coming up and down with the sun. But
yeah.
anyway,
Great.
yeah, lesson learned. And I probably didn't help my cause, for playing for Ireland. But, again, it was even sweeter when I did, you know.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
absolutely. And
yeah.
what did those months in detention teach you about you and your mindset? How did it shape you going forward?
Um, yeah, I suppose it made me very close to realize how much that I had in the world, in Ireland and with my family and how much they cared. Um, and then again, when I was there, the people who did help me were rugby people, and also, I went to schools and I was taken in by people who were, monks or, uh, going to Irish embassy, the British embassy, the people who really, like I was even asked, you want to do a midnight express and all that sort of crack, and I just showed you, uh, how good people are in the world, not just the bad people. It just showed you how much and what your family meant to you and the people who sort of believed in you. And then through it all, I wrote to Heather, and from that, we're married now 42 years. So she stuck by me when there's a lot of people were like snow in a ditch, come springtime, it's gone. And some people just disappeared, when the times got tough. And that's when you're good mates and you're sort of not so good mates.
Yeah. And did that fuel your would you say that fueled your like determination to that time to bounce back strongly? Did that make you more determined as a
Yeah,
character?
I think it made
Yeah.
me really determined on that. I say to myself, look, I'm not the most skillful player in the world, but I can tell you what I can do. I can be the fittest player.
Yeah.
And when I came back from that, I ran a marathon. I was one of the fastest, or not, well, one of the best at, running 3,000 or times and all that sort of crackers. Um, you were that bleep test. I was probably one of the best doing that as well with Nigel Carr. And those are kind of things that made me very determined. You
Mm.
know, I was always a trainer on my own, so I said, right, well, I'm going to give him the best shot,
Mm.
and that made me very determined. And I knew I was going to be a pushback, and I was eventually told, you were going to do your time before you got it. Just because of your antics in Argentina. But
Yeah. I think they should invite you back, Willie. I think the Argentinian Rugby Board need to invite you back to pay back that time you were detained for a couple of months and like be their guest of honor. That's what.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely, yeah,
yeah.
no.
And I can see
Like,
what you're saying about the because the Ireland RFU had been very conservative
yeah, well,
at
they
that
certainly
time.
were always very conservative, and
Yeah,
that's, don't mention the war. As I said, I got told Maggie Thatcher at the time she certainly was going to have a difficult time in the Falklands.
yeah,
But it showed you as well when you saw the women who were walking around the pink square, pink Pink Square, yeah.
Yeah,
They'd lost their sons, and it
yeah,
was just a different ballgame.
Must have given you a
yeah,
lot of confidence, though, in
yeah.
reflection
Absolutely.
afterwards. Obviously, when you're in the middle of the melee of all that going on, I'm sure it was very overwhelming. But to sort of come through an experience like that must have given you great confidence and great fortitude in yourself. Because I mean, those I mean, to say that period of time was challenging is probably the biggest understatement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To be having potentially a public execution hung over your head, to be left alone by the rest of the team. Obviously they would have gone back at some point, and you're left there sort of carrying the can. I mean, that must have, as you
Yeah, I
look.
think
Go on.
it certainly it makes you think about your whole you know livelihood and your own self and your resilience, and certainly it wasn't just plain sailing. I went through a lot of anxiety, and
Hmm.
going, and then my lawyer was being threatened as well, and it was a major process. I kind of always had the belief that I would get out. I wasn't going to do a Midnight Express. I wanted to go through due process, and if that's what I had to do, then I had to do it. But it certainly made me reflect a lot more on myself, and what I needed to do, and made me very determined to achieve what I wanted to achieve out of rugby football. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's a part and parcel of the again, taking the positive out of a mistake.
Hmm.
You know, the person who wrote to me and I wrote to them. I married, and we've been together, and we have three fantastic kids and grandchildren now, and I think that's the way you look at it.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
was all part of the journey.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about another monumental moment, say a more positive one. You often immortalised in Irish rugby folklore for marching into the Haka when you played New Zealand. What was the message you were trying to send? Was it pre-planned, or was it something that just happened? And what did it teach you in that moment about yourself and your teammates?
Yeah, there's a fair bit there, and first of all, it was planned.
Hmm.
It was planned by Jimmy Davison, who, from my point of view, was my greatest mentor, my greatest coach, and my greatest friend. Unfortunately, he died tragically young, with cancer, but he was without a doubt so far ahead in terms of the game, and he had a kind of an obsession with New Zealand, um, because he played against them so many times, and he was always on the losing side. And his view was, and it was really interesting. He said, "Look," and he spoke to the team about this. It wasn't just Willie Anderson's crack. It was everybody was given
Hmm.
this sort of overall sort of picture of what we wanted to do, and his philosophy and psychology was, well, and like it happened. I was down last year, I think it was, watching the All Blacks in Lansdowne Road, or the Viva, as they call it. And I said, "Well, watch this here." Like, he was down with it. Watch. I said, "Look, watch when they do the haka. What's going to happen?" And what's going to happen is the people in the audience, in the crowd, they clap. So they're immediately, the crowd are clapping the haka. Your home crowd are clapping the haka. So he said, "Well, we're going to change that crack. We're going to actually get them to clap our dance, our methodology of standing up to the haka." And that's what happened. And we were all told this: pick a guy in front of you. You're going to march up and get into his face and eyeball him. Now, I don't know if the message got through to all the people, because
Yeah.
As you can see from the photographs, there was a fairly big sort of wedge, like like geese flying. Some people maybe didn't get the message maybe completely, and honestly, of all the games I ever played, of all the atmospheres I've ever been in, unfortunately, I've been in quite a few which have been extraordinary. That was, I thought, you could have boxed the atmosphere. It was just immense. The crowd were going ballistic. The New Zealanders didn't know what to do, and it was just unbelievable. Like, I mean, it was just fantastic, and it gave us such a buoyancy. But unfortunately, with that side, you had, and this was always the difficulty. Ulster at that time were probably one of the best provincial sides in the world. We've beaten everybody nearly, um, and and the difficulties, we were at a pitch. Now there were 7 or 8 of us on the team, but you, as like any corporation or team, you're gonna play to the lowest common denominator. And we were so fit and so really up for a game. But there was guys who weren't at that level of fitness or being able to stick with the team, and that hindered us. There's no doubt about it. So as I always say, like we definitely we won the dance and we won the crowd, and we turned the psychology right round. They weren't clapping the Haka that day. They were clapping our, setting eyeball to eyeball, where Wayne Shell for the captain, because they asked him, was he scared, and he says, yeah, he was scared because he thought I was going to kiss him, you know, because I was that close. And Jimmy, it was fantastic, but unfortunately we weren't able to. Like the first half, it was, I think we might have been ahead, or we were certainly even Stevens, but then New Zealand sides in those days, they were collectively fitter, collectively much more skillful, and we couldn't match them for certainly fitness the whole game, and that's why a lot of times in those days, the New Zealanders, beat Ireland, and that's why they hadn't beaten them until they beat them at Chicago.
Yeah.
Such an iconic game, or an iconic moment in rugby. Hence, we're talking about it, 40 odd years later.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, it ultimately, at its core, at least in my understanding of it, the Haka is a challenge, right? And you're meeting that
Yeah,
challenge.
and I went to the New Zealanders afterwards, and they were all
Yeah,
praiseworthy of it, and they said,
yeah,
you threw a gauntlet down, and we picked it up, and we had to fight hard, but you certainly, you threw a gauntlet down, and you played with your heart and your soul, and they had no offense at all. I mean, unlike
yeah,
some folk in the IRFU who were going ballistic, but anyway.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember actually watching that game with my father, Willie, and the atmosphere was just electric. I mean, you say that some of the guys were standing back, but I think you just couldn't wait to get stuck into them, and they were trying to hold you back. And like Buck, you were facing Buck Shelford, and probably one of the most fearsome like rugby players at the
Yeah.
time, and like I actually thought, oh my God, it's going to kick off before the actual game starts. It was,
Because that was, I like,
yeah,
in fairness now, they took it well, and yeah,
yeah,
like, and again, I suppose that's about leadership, and I suppose, between myself and Jimmy, we maybe didn't, um, align the team well enough to say, look, we're all in this here together, because some people said to me after, I was never told, and I said, you were told, you actually didn't want to hear what you were told, but they were all told and they were all agreed that we're going to do this.
yeah,
Because like the likes of Davy Irwin and company, they were driving forward as well, and some guys were going shapers, and certainly the wee Australian guy who was playing out half for us, and what am I doing here?
yeah, Yeah.
So
Was that Brian Smith, I think, wasn't
Brian
it?
Smith,
Yeah.
I've come over here to play for Ireland, and I'm an Australian, and I'm taking on the Haka.
And
But
do you still stand by your comments, Willie, when you say they won the game, but we won the dance? You still
yeah, yeah,
stand by that
well,
40
yeah,
years later?
yeah, I do, yeah, because in fairness, we did win the dance. We won exactly what we needed. We needed the
Yeah.
crowd on our side. We had to have every domino going in the right direction, and
Mm.
I knew it was going to be tough, like come the end of the game, but we certainly give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. I know they were seen as pretty much unbeatable, I think, the All
Yeah,
Blacks at that particular
yeah,
time.
they were they
They were
were
good.
unbelievable side,
Yeah. Yeah.
like they were just so far ahead in terms of like fitness, like
Mm.
and we and particularly guys like in those days, like some guys in Ireland didn't start training until Christmas because they were training for Ireland. They weren't training for the province.
Mm.
It was
Mm.
like different ball game. Where Jimmy Davison turned us right around from being unfit to being one of the fittest sides in the globe on the globe at that stage.
Mm.
And that's what encountered us because we won so many games in the last 5 minutes
Mm.
because of our fitness and our belief.
Mm.
But yeah, that was good. It was good. I can still feel it now today. It was just such a great memory.
Yeah.
And so many people who have seen it or watched it on TV or watched it on YouTube, and it's a lovely memory, and for the guys who
Mm.
played in the game, and the guys that I played with, and those guys, like Jimmy McCoys and
Mm.
Dave Irwins and people like that, Keith Crossan's,
Mm.
immense guys,
Hmm.
Yeah.
top notch,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Nigel Cars,
yeah,
they were total warriors,
for sure.
total warriors. That's the ultimate W in
Mm.
my triangle.
Mm.
The warriors, winners, wavers, and
And the other one.
the other one.
Yeah.
Now, before we change tack slightly there, just I was in New Zealand a few years back and happened to be in the same place as Buck Shelford, the All Blacks captain that day. And
Yeah,
I took a moment and asked him what he thought of it, and he loved it. Thought it was great because it's a challenge. They wanted to be challenged. That was their
yeah.
mindset, and thought it was fantastic what you and the team had done, and had fond memories of it. So I thought that was interesting. But as I said, you coached Moo and myself at London Irish, and we've both experienced your leadership, expertise, empathy, honesty. But let's get into your core leadership philosophy as a coach. Well, how would you define it?
Um, well, I suppose if I go back to the two words like trust and respect, if I go on character, I suppose in ways my character would suggest that I would have the personality type to be a head coach, a leader of that type, and 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 with the character, probably with the values that I carried, with being honest. I think it's vitally important that any coach, and can become very, very clear. You have to be honest with a player. A player wants you to be honest with him. He doesn't want you, if it's bad news, he wants to hear bad news. He doesn't want it, you know, wrapped up. He wants to know, and then he wants to know exactly, what he needs to do if he wants to learn to go forward. And you have to be competent enough to be able to actually tell him, look, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do to get on. And then when he does those things and he does make it to the next level of himself, that he does get on, that he isn't forgotten. Um, I think it's very important that you know the game. I think the thing that I learned which I had to learn the hard way, was to be able to empower other people, and trust them to be able to do it, um, and and to ensure that if you're going to get into the game of management or head coach or CEO or whatever it is, that you bring along the people that you can trust yourself and empower them, let them get on with it, and allow them to tell you, that, 'cause I had, whenever I was coaching that Dungannon team, I had Davy Hazlett, not necessarily just as manager, but my manager, where he would say, "Well, hold on, I'll speak to that person," or to find out what the mood in the team was, be able to take take advice, because everybody needs advice. Everybody needs a mentor, no matter who you are and what level you get to. It's vitally important that you can take advice, and if you can take that advice, that it doesn't make you a weak person. It makes you a
No.
strong person, because you're able to take the advice. You don't, and look, I realized I didn't know it all, and I needed to learn more. And I suppose my philosophy is always to keep an open mind and keep learning. It's and take chances and try something different and new. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does work, fantastic. But don't just get tied down to, well, this is the way we did it, and this is the way we always did it.
Absolutely. I think Tony Underwood was on a couple of weeks ago. He mentioned that about taking chances as a
Yeah.
leader. It's very important quality.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
you take chances, and know that it's going to be mostly a setback. You're going to be setbacks.
mm,
But then again, the greatest people in the world and in history, they didn't work the first time off. They had to have mistakes and make
yeah,
mistakes to get
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And I suppose that's what I've probably learned in the last while. Made a lot of mistakes uh, to be where I am, where I became and got there.
yeah, yeah.
But I think if
Absolutely.
you're true, if you're honest and you're competent in what you're doing, that's a big step forward in any establishment, any management situation.
Yeah, I think as well, Willie. Obviously, you're a very humble guy, but one of the other qualities, the two are quite linked, and they work together. Was that you came from the right place. Your heart was always in the right place, and me and Fitzy both
Mm.
talk about it a lot, and therefore you could have the reason why that you could have difficult conversations with players is because they knew that you were coming from the right place, and I think that's a very important quality as a leader that you have as well. I think Fitzy obviously agrees with
Yeah,
that.
no agenda, very direct,
Yeah,
and honest, and that came through in all the dealings that I ever had with you or observed.
yeah, yeah. And going on to Ulster, Willie, they say you're never a prophet in your own land. And as a proud Ulsterman, did you ever feel disappointed that you didn't get the head coach job? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently or change about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it probably rankled me a lot at the time. However, it was probably just circumstances. There was people maybe from that maybe I kind of ruffled, and maybe I should have kept my mouth shut on occasions or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what the situation was. It was certainly, there was, a club versus club thing at the time. Getting players to come to Dungannon may not have helped my situation. But I think in ways, it took me a while to get over that fact, because it was something I really wanted to do. However, I suppose in ways, I was fortunate then to coach the likes of London Irish. It was fantastic to coach London Irish, and the players that I had there are fantastic. To coach the Dungannon side, who literally was an Ulster side, and they were like, the rugby they played was just, people are still talking about the rugby they played. And to have an opportunity to coach Leinster, for 3 years, and coach some of the best players in the world at that particular time, So and even then Scotland, which like it was an education. Scotland was an education and a really tough education, certainly for me. But to have not to have coached Ulster, I think yeah, it was disappointing at the time. However, I had great opportunities otherwise,
Absolutely, yeah.
and when you have an opportunity to not coach because nobody can coach the likes of Brian O'Driscoll, but to have him in the team and to maybe guide him a little bit. But he's like a genius. He's a rugby genius. He's like George Best. Nobody can say they coached George Best because George Best was like genius, as Brian O'Driscoll was genius. To have an opportunity to see a genius at work because you'd show him something, he would do it immediately. He was able to do it completely, correctly, immediately, and that is a fantastic sign of a genius if you show him something.
Yeah.
And to take on board, and to make decisions. So yeah, it was disappointing, but at the end of the day, like I coached Ireland as well with Jerry Murphy, and that was a great time, with Jeremy Davis and people like that. They're coming through and coached a lot of young fellas, and even the academy at the end of my time. Fantastic. I suppose I'd probably say my 40 would have been young fellas between 18 and 21, and trying to get not only just the quality of what they needed to do, but what was needed to play at that level, what you needed mentally and physically, and maybe even spiritually, emotionally, was always something that I enjoyed delivering, to young fellas, because particularly people in Ulster, because a lot of guys in Ulster, don't really know what it meant to play for Ulster. Really, what it meant, the whole aspect of what an Ulsterman is, and that's that's vitally important as well, because it's an important province, and it's very important in Irish rugby's province, even though I'm
Yeah.
not doing so well, because you always monitor a side or recognise a side of many people and many players they have on the national side, and at the moment we're struggling. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and I think you touched upon a very, very pertinent point, and I would say this is largely replicated around the world. Certainly in the British Isles. You mentioned Ulster there having that identity and that very proud identity, and moving from London Irish to Ulster, that was very apparent right from day one how people felt about it. And I wonder whether or not we haven't lost something that needs to be rekindled in a lot of these professional pathways and programs with these storied clubs and provinces, and that they continue to keep and evolve their identity. Because it is important. It gives you're playing for something bigger than yourself. You're playing for those guys that went before you and that will come after you, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, I mean, you're just borrowing that jersey for a particular period of time, as I did.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's very important for guys in Ulster to understand it, and Ireland as well. But particularly when you're coming from a province which has a history of, like they always say, a good Irish team has always got three or four Ulstermen, or maybe, because it's important. Um, Having said that, I suppose whenever I come through, and there's no reflection on you guys, when I came through Ulster, it was just Ulstermen. There might have been maybe one guy from Donegal, and if you're going to tar the brush, you need to make sure that the people coming in know what the story is, what the legacy is. And I think sometimes provinces maybe with the coaches who come in who are not from there. Again, I go back to the fact that we need coaches coming through from our province to instill that, and it's vitally important, because there is a legacy there to be had of historical legacy, you know. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. We've touched upon there how you evolved personally and how your coaching voice evolved. Could you expand upon that and how certain challenges or certain moments in your life allowed that growth within your methodology?
I think the biggest, as I think I alluded on to it earlier in the discussion here, is the greatest person I had to get to know was myself. I had to get to know me. I had to get to know what my black spots were, my hidden spots. It was vitally important to go through a process of knowing exactly what my personality type was, how I could progress, going through a process of being pushed through that process, and learning from that. And it was very tough. It was very, very tough. Stephen Abood and I, myself, went through that process, and then we helped each other progress through it, and look in the mirror and say, Chambers, you need to go forward. You need to know yourself, because if you don't, you're not going to survive in leadership. You're not going to survive in your leadership. It was a hard process, and that was the biggest event in my life. Which was, looking back, it was very tough, but very rewarding, because then I was able to actually understand people better, able to communicate with people better, be even more honest with people, and that was a big thing. And then from that, ensuring that my way wasn't the only way, learning to ensure that I kept learning, get more information from other people, what's a better way of doing that, but being strong enough to say, look, I think this is the way we need to go, guys. I think this is the way we go. We're going to make mistakes along the way here, and I don't mind making mistakes, as long as you don't mind making mistakes, and I'm not going to criticize you making mistakes. But this is the way we want to go, and this is the way we want to play the game, and you've all agreed to play this way. So I think knowing myself, and that's what a lot of leaders, well, they need to do. If they don't know themselves, and they don't know, I've heard of some leaders like saying, I need to change, and I'm going to change this and this and this, and then they come back in the next week, and they've gone through a wee sort of happy clappy sort of profiling, and then they go in next week and they're doing exactly the same thing, unless they get a hard, tough task. And it's like any change. It takes 60 or 80 days to change. It takes a year to change. It takes somebody to say, by the way, you don't want to go down that line. And those people who are in charge, or who are leaders, are saying, well, it's got me here. But if you want to stay there and you want to be successful, you need to change. You need to, unless you're absolutely top class, but most people, can always get better, can always improve on what they're doing, but they're not going to improve if they don't know what they're doing, or who they are. And most people don't know who they are and why they're going off, having the red mist, or throwing the toys, or, because they don't know themselves. And that was a big factor for me.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere about being authentic, and learning who you are, being yourself, and that way, if you're yourself and you're honest, then no one can ever question you as a leader. And I thought, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you go through that process of pain to really know who you are, then you can lead. Um,
Absolutely. And the thing is, then you will be positive in your growth because
yeah.
you know the direction to go in. Now
Mm,
it is very, very tough. It is very difficult to
mm,
stay on, because you will fall back into, go backwards. But
mm,
if you can go forward, keep going forward, to what is important, your next move that you go
mm,
forward to, where you
mm,
want to be at.
mm.
Um, but if you just stay still, you're not going forward.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest challenge to me. That was the biggest challenge.
And also, you mentioned mentors that you've had. It's important to have strong leaders around you as well that can keep you in check. And
Uh,
I mean,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you
And
don't have
and
that,
and that is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of
mm,
somebody saying to
mm,
themselves, "I need to change," and
mm,
I am strong enough to say that I need to do that. And
mm,
a lot of people think, "Oh, you've got somebody talking to you. Oh, what you can't." No, no, I've got somebody who's, actually keeping me driving north. Keeping
mm,
my compass going north. And there are times I'm going to go west, but if I get somebody to say, "Hey, boy, get back," you need to go back towards
yeah,
north again.
yeah,
Very important. And
absolutely.
and then it's tough. That is, and it's not nice to hear. Like you could have done that better, or, but what about, changing that vocabulary or doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, but they're coming from the right place, and it's easy to take on board that
Yep.
feedback, or if you
Yeah,
think they're
because
coming
they're
from.
on your team. You're on your
Yeah,
team, and you can,
yeah.
you picked them to do that job.
Yeah, and in terms of players, what are the non-negotiables that you install? I mean, me and Fitzy probably already know the answer to this, but that you would install in players, and you would say to people that are watching this who are running businesses, what's the non-negotiables you would install in employees, players, teams?
I think the most important thing, is when you sit down with the team and when you sit down with the players, that they have agreed. The agreement has been on how to play the game. Um, so you have a game plan. You've got a game plan, and then from the game plan, you pick, right. We're playing against Munster this week, or we're playing against Dungannon this week, or we're playing against Saracens this week. Yeah, that's a match plan. So this is how we've agreed on how we're gonna play these guys. We've all been part of this process. The leaders have been part of it. You've been part of it. And we want to stick to that game plan because that's what we think we're going to do. And the most important thing is for many players accepting, and agreeing to that game plan, and then empowering them to go out and do it. So that they go out and do it. The non-negotiable is somebody, if the pack, if the lion pack are going north all together and somebody's heading south, that is a non-negotiable because you stick to what you agreed to do, pal. And just because you've come under pressure or you think you can win the match, then we need to have a serious chat.
Yeah,
And then knowing that you can trust the team and you respect the team to be able to actually deliver.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think a non-negotiable there as well is you as a leader that you find the right people that fit in with your non-negotiables. They naturally got it, so therefore it's
yeah.
easier. Would you say?
Yeah, and if you've got two or three warriors, the top of the top of the pile,
Yeah,
who are actually going to say, follow me. This is what we're doing. There's going to be pressure at some stage. We need to now, we need to do it this way. This game management, and listen. But I've seen so many guys, and you know, I've seen guys who are try who are, you can nearly say he's going to try and win the game himself. It's like the guy kicking for touch. I need to prove to myself I can kick 50 meters. And then this is 50 meters. And then he says, I'll tell you what I'll do the next time. I'll kick 60 meters. Instead of saying, I think he'll kick 30 and stick it in the touch. So, you can nearly say to some guys, Shaper's pressure on, he is going to be able to do it. And that's the biggest thing, I suppose, in ways in which I probably haven't touched on as much. And I've seen this happen. You know, when you go through change and when your team goes through change and when you are put under pressure, it's okay in training. Everybody is happy in in the off season. Oh, what a fantastic off! And many times people say the off season we had was the best ever. And you have to understand you've got you've got 45 players, and by the way, first match there's only 15 of them playing. So you've got immediately 30 other guys saying, well, why am I not picked? I had a great off season too. And then everything is happy in the off season because no pressure. There's no pressure on the team. There's no pressure if you want to lose or draw. And there's no pressure on you as a coach or pressure on you as a CEO. But when the pressure comes on, how are you going to cope? How is the players going to cope? How are you going to go back to what you were and scream and shout? Or are you going to keep calm and go forward? And that's very important. So you have to see what people are like under pressure, and if you can see your players, your guys that are warriors, and they survive under pressure, then you say, "Jeepers, we've got the makings of a good team here."
Yeah,
because they are not going to crumble when the pressure comes on, and that's vital.
absolutely.
So,
You've won many titles over your career: player, coach, mentor, leader, father. What does crossing the line mean to you now as a rugby man, and not as a rugby man, but as a man?
I suppose I probably what I've learned, having crossed the line a few times, and I've learned from the mistakes I made.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very important. If you cross the line and you make mistakes, learn from them. It's vitally important. Crossing the line and actually then mentoring people, crossing the line, particularly to my sons and my daughter, who are all in management and are all in, and I know Jonathan is very done brilliantly, but Thomas and Chloe equally have done brilliantly. And the nice thing is that they would ask you, give me a read on this situation. So, crossing a line for them to ensure that some of the mistakes that I've made or some of the things that I've witnessed or experienced is, and resilience that I've had, it's crossed to them. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing is that, the things that I've learned and maybe the mistakes that I've made have been part of my journey and have been a great benefit to my journey because they've helped me shape the person I'm in and shape the people that my kids are as well, because they can see that by making a mistake isn't the end of the world. It's very important to learn from it.
Yeah.
You don't give up.
There's a great life lesson there, Willie, because sometimes you make mistakes, you look back and think, oh, I did this, I did that. But I think the main thing is your mistakes made. And the only way you can deal with it is move forward. Don't make the same mistake, learn from it, basically.
You're not gonna go through life and not make mistakes. We all did them when we were growing up and when we're still doing it. I'm still making mistakes. But you're still learning from it. If you don't, you're going backwards. Or you're living in a situation whereby you're scared to make a mistake because sometimes you need to take a risk, and that risk might make it you're making mistakes, so you learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what's it feel like? We talked about your family, your children. What's it feel like watching your son, J.W. Anderson, lead on a global stage in a very different world to what you're used to?
Yeah, and it's funny actually. A funny one was like whenever they were growing up, and Thomas and Chloe and and Jonathan were, they were down at Dungannon and whatever, they would say like, are you Willie Anderson's kids? And now it's, are you Jonathan Anderson's father? So it's
Yeah.
totally, totally fantastic turnaround. Um, uh,
Mm,
well, to say him, he's just genius. I mean, honestly, I'm saying that because he is. He's a genius.
mm,
Um, and 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 they all have done fantastically well. Jonathan has excelled unbelievably, but there's so many factors, so many similarities in terms of what he's going through. He's made mistakes, he's got over it, he's driven, he's resilient, he's had the determination, and that came from him being dyslexic and having to overcome that and overcome, somebody saying you're a failure, you know, even and that and like my daughter is the same, that drive and determination to show the world. Not money isn't his driver. Being the best in the world is his driver,
mm.
and being resilient, um, to learn how to learn coming through the whole process, and that and but that above all, but also a lot of the factors that I would experience myself as leadership, you know, uh, making sure, like we talked about this today, and it's vitally important to us, making sure that you bring with you your team, the people that you trust, people that you can trust and respect, and he's had to do that going into DR. He brought 10 or 12 of his people from the Levy, the people that have been with him from the very get-go, he still has on board. Um, and then looking at not just the people around you, but looking at the personalities, because it doesn't matter what language they speak, they're still going to fall into certain categories of personalities,
Mm.
and being able to manage those ones, but he's intuitive enough to be able to do that, and creative enough to be able to do that. But
Yeah.
he would still, which is lovely. He would still, even though in the position he's in, ask Heather and I for, I'm in this situation. What do you think? And that's great. As does Thomas, as does Chloe.
Mm,
So it's good to still have that sort of um, lending ear, as it were, because a lot
mm.
of things that you would experience through being in a leadership situation is we're all similar. There's a lot of similarities, whether it's
Mm,
creative director or whether it's CEO or whether it's a director of rugby.
mm,
So it's
mm.
it's I don't know, it's we're so proud of them all. We're very proud of John, but we're very proud of Thomas because he's working for him as well,
Mm.
and he helps him with all these aspects of his contracts and all that there, and he's got so many totally respects and trusts, and that's very important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And my daughter's in management; she's managing online doctors, and
Mm,
that's another way how to manage people and go
mm,
through the process. So it's
mm,
um, yeah, they've all done exceptionally well. Uh,
mm, mm.
Jonathan certainly at the moment is one of the best director designers in the world, which
Mm.
that's where he wants to be.
Yeah. No, it's
So
brilliant to
both of
read.
us, Heather and I, are very
Yeah.
proud, right? We're very fortunate to have such a great family
Mm,
and grandchildren. So, and that's when you get a bit older and you reflect that that's that's the icings on the cake. Those are the icings on the cake.
yeah.
You know what I mean? That,
Yeah.
that they still want to talk to you, still want you to be with them, to help them, come to their shows, come and see what they're doing, and help their grandchild. That's you can't buy it.
And when you go to those shows, Willie, do they know who you are, what you've done when
Well,
you're dealing
eventually they
in
do
that
actually,
world?
You know, I was talking to James Bond there last time, and I was
Uh,
telling him that I was his dad. So he
yeah,
had all. Some of the people that you meet are absolutely, and they want to be there because they have seen somebody coming through
yeah,
and making it, and they've made it,
yeah, yeah,
and like it's and there's still, I'm a great believer. No matter who you are in the world, you're a human.
yeah.
The bin man's a bin man, and
Mm,
he's got feelings, and he's a good guy as well as everybody else.
yeah,
Everybody's, in my view, is equal.
yeah, absolutely.
Some people think they're more equal than others, but
Isn't that the truth?
yeah, for sure.
So
But
when you look at your own journey and now the journey your children are on, players that you've worked with, coaches you've collaborated with, did you see leadership in them at an early stage? Do you think it's inherited, or do you think it's forged, or a combination of the two?
yeah, I think as we said earlier, it is a bit of common. I think it's the person that you are first of all.
Hmm.
There are people whose personality would lend themselves, and if you decipher, the world's leaders, there's a fair chance that they're gonna fall into a couple of brackets
Hmm.
of personality types, and that's kind of a genetic thing. Then I think as well, the empathy or the honesty or the integrities, I think those are slightly personality, but majority wise in terms of the environment they came from, their upbringing, their their value set that they were given, um, and how they were nurtured at school, and and the way they went through school and that sort of thing. I think that's part of it as well. So, and very much coming from their family, their parents, how they were brought up and how they were encouraged. It's vitally important that we never really hammered our kids in terms of you must go and do your work. They wanted to do it. They wanted to go and get better because you could see two people who were driven. Heather and myself, both very wanted to achieve in education and coaching, and leadership. So that I think that rubs off in your kids as well. But yeah, um, I think that's I think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from you. There are certain followers in life, and that's grand. You need people who are going to follow, but there's certain leaders in life who you enjoy leading, and it's a genetical thing, I think, and also the way they were brought up. Now, how they how they do leading is another factor.
Yeah,
Um,
I
you
mean,
know what I mean?
there's different types of leaders, leaders for different arenas, and someone might be a lead, might not be a leader, say in the sports field, but could be a leader elsewhere. And I suppose it's finding your niche. It's a really good question, Fitzy, because I wouldn't know the answer to that,
Mm.
Willie. Like, is leadership inherited or forged? I think it's inherited,
Yeah.
or about your background,
Yep. Yep.
and your
Yep.
motivation. Can it be forged? I don't know. I don't think so, but
I think it can definitely be developed, right?
Oh
yeah,
yeah, it certainly can be developed and
yeah,
challenged. Yes, no doubt about that.
yeah.
yeah,
But I've seen some guys who have not been the correct personality
mm,
in leadership jobs,
mm,
and they've struggled,
Mm.
being directors of rugby or head
mm,
coaches, and they've struggled because it's not
mm,
a natural. And then by being under pressure, they're going to go backwards in themselves and actually come across not as a good leader.
Hmm.
Whereas it'd be better actually being an assistant coach and being comfortable with that.
yeah,
But it may be the people who, that's again, it comes back to people not doing the due diligence and process
Hmm.
of
yeah,
being able to pick the correct leader. and that's
Yeah.
vitally important.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I mean, going on to your legacy as a leader, Willie. I mean, they say that you're not truly a leader until you develop other leaders. So Alex Ferguson goes on about this as well. I mean, but if you look at the long list of leaders that you've shaped and influenced their careers, I mean, you've mentioned Mark McCall, Jeremy Davidson, uh, David Humphreys, Bryn Cunningham. I mean, the list can go on. People like Malcolm O'Kelly, Fitzy, obviously, say what a guiding influence you've been on his life and as a player. But you know, when you entered the job as a coach, I mean, did you ever know that you were coaching something? I mean, far deeper than rugby. Um,
I probably didn't at the time, and I really am quite, very humbled by what you're saying there. If you can look back in your life and you can say that I have had a sort of an effect on people, or a positive effect on people, fantastic. I think what you're trying to come across to players, as we've discussed the whole of this whole session, is that they trusted you. They trusted you, your personality, to be able to give them the right answer, to be honest with them, and have enough knowledge of what you knew to be able to help them be a better player. And I think that's very important, that every player wants to be better. And if you can help them with your knowledge of the game, or of that position or whatever, and they can trust you, then that's fantastic. And if you can take that as something that you want to take forward, I'm very humbled by that. I must say,
yeah,
and the philosophy and your philosophy of the game, if they can take that as well, because
yeah,
the philosophy has to come from the coach, no
yeah,
matter what, and he has to sell it to the players, and they have to agree that that's the way they want to play. And
yeah,
if you do that, if you can sell that, and Jimmy Davison did that to me, and I've tried to do it for other people, and he influenced me massively. His legacy to me and
mm,
mentoring me,
mm,
unbelievable, because
mm,
he wanted the game to start on the wing. That was his philosophy. I want the
yeah,
game to start on the wing. So we
yeah,
want the ball to get to the wing as fast as possible.
mm.
And I kind of had that sort of view, even though I'm a second row with my
Yeah.
head up Fitzy's backside, I'm
Not a place for the
I,
faint-hearted.
I, I, I had I had to have the thinking of an out half, and a centre, to not just be stuck in
Mm,
mauls and scrums and lineouts. I wanted the game to
mm,
explode out there. And that came from Jimmy Davis, and that came from maybe going to King's Scholars and playing a brand of rugby which was
mm,
so enjoyable to play, not just
mm,
going from scrum to ruck to maul.
mm. I think as well, Willie, as well, I can think of players that perhaps are not as well known, and where I think that your coaching has benefited them elsewhere. You know, I could name players I could think of that I think, you kind of thrived under your coaching, and and they take the lessons that you teach from rugby into their lives, their personal lives, their business lives, and there's countless players where I could think of where they've been influenced by you.
I would 100.
Honestly, I really appreciate that. That's very, very humbling,
Mm,
I know, and it's nice. It's nice that you say that, and it's nice that
mm,
that you have an effect, and
mm,
you'd like to think of all the players that you did have through your hands, that you had a positive effect on.
mm,
You're gonna have a percentage that maybe you know particularly with the guys who really find it difficult to take information on board.
mm,
You're maybe not going to convince them,
mm,
but the guys who did want to learn and go forward and progress and be challenged. Certainly, you know, I would have had a good feeling with those guys the whole way time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would totally back up what Liam said there. I mean, speaking from personal perspective, you know, your influence on how I saw or see the game, but as Moo alluded to there, far beyond that, you know. And you talked about trust, but that trust is built on honesty, it's built on empathy, and it's built on visible characteristics like your work ethic. You know, that rubs off on people, and it's certainly made. I mean, Moo and I talk about this amongst other things a lot. It certainly rubbed off, or at least we'd like to think it rubbed off on us and how we try and conduct ourselves, for sure.
Well, look, I am so glad that you two guys have made it good. And like I'm so proud of you guys, and you know it's lovely to catch up. It's been a real enjoyable afternoon's conversation, man.
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed chatting to you, and thank you so much for inviting me on board.
Yeah.
We haven't finished yet, though, Willie. We've got a few more questions.
Yeah,
We got another length of ruck and run to do.
Yeah.
go for it.
Mo, I'll leave it over to you there with the questions.
Yeah. Quick fire questions. And what's one rugby lesson every young player should learn early on?
Listen. Yeah, listen. Yeah, you know, if you can listen and learn, honestly, it's vital. Yeah, listen and learn.
And what's your go-to ritual habit when the pressure is on?
Try to stay calm, try to stay positive, and try to stay encouraged. I try to, you know, when the pressure's on, don't lose the bop completely.
Okay. And a quote, lyric, or mantra that's anchored you through tough times?
Yeah, I think the most, well, for me is you keep going. Yeah, you never give up. You never give up. I suppose the most important thing is never ever give up. You always keep going to the very end of the game or the very end of what you're doing, and always don't do half a job, do a full job.
Absolutely. And what's one thing people wouldn't expect about Willie Anderson?
They wouldn't expect him to be going to fashion shows.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And what's next for you as a man, a mentor, or a storyteller?
I think I'd love to. I'd love to still mentor, but I think I'm moving into the storytelling part now. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and I suppose being a grandfather is vital. You know, to maybe hand over a few little tricks of the trade on to the next generation of rugby players.
Absolutely. You're still coaching, Willie.
I still will. I'll be back now with the under sevens, I think, next year.
Very good.
Oh, great. Great.
Yeah.
So, Willie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Honestly, you know, people can learn so much from listening to you. I mean, you've done so much in your career. We talked about the Haka. We talked about some of the adversity you've faced. We talked about you as a leader, all the great teams that you've coached, all the great players and people that you've influenced. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you know, we really thank you for your time. Thank you.
No problem at all. And look, it's fantastic to see both of you guys alive and kicking and looking very, very healthy. I must
Easy
say.
paper round, Willie. You said that.
No.
Look, guys, it's a pleasure. You've brought back tremendous memories of those fantastic days in London Irish. Those probably were the two greatest years of my life.
Yeah.
Of not just rugby, but all factors of life. It was just epic,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah,
And the camaraderie we all had as a group, that I think that, you know, that last night in that bar when we were all together and you said goodbye, that stuck with me
yeah,
forever and will always stick with me because you were such a fantastic group of guys.
yeah,
And glad everybody in that group has gone on to do great things. So well done, you two.
yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Willie. It's
Willie.
been
We,
an absolute pleasure.
All
yeah,
right, man.
thank
Thanks
you.
very much. Cheers.